All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for January 15th. It's good to be back. I think we've had a pretty good set of community meetings so far this year, but this one is especially special. Say that 5 times fast because it is our quarter one road mapping planning. So for everybody tuning in, first time, this is the session where essentially we just go through the suggestions from the GitHub discussion for this roadmap. And the whole point is for us to kind of come out of this community meeting with a set of high level issues, issues, some high level initiatives, things that we want to focus on as a project and as a community over the first quarter of 2025. And I will, of course, acknowledge that we are already 2 weeks into our first quarter of 2025 for January through the end of March, but that's okay. Time is a human construct, and we're all gonna be all right if we start a little bit late. So I want to keep that in mind as we think about like all the agile velocity, whatever, whatevers. This is really just a chance for everybody to come in and give their feedback and for us to talk about what we want to do. So just before we get started, I do want to say one quick thing that's not related to roadmap, which is there have been a couple of nominations for additional wasmCloud maintainers. So people who have been showing up really well in the community, contributing over quite a long time, and I think it is. To be honest, a little long overdue. I am really excited to, I'm really excited to up rewarding people for being a part of this community because you are everybody who's in this call has been here for quite a long time keeping track. So that's been happening on the maintainer side. So we're going to be reaching out to some folks over the next couple of days just to ask if you're interested, if you feel like you have bandwidth for essentially being a recognized contributor and being somebody who's more involved in the project, which is really saying nothing because you all are already pretty involved. So we're super excited to do that. I think in our next community meeting we'll recognize everybody and go forward from there. So, anyways, no announcements today. We'll do it next time. On to quarter one roadmap planning. So I think that it would be best for us to start. Am I already sharing? I am. I don't need to do this again. I think it would be best for us to start by taking a look back at the quarter four of 2024 roadmap, just to see what we kind of set out to do and what's left if anything. So really, I think we've done pretty regular check-ins on this roadmap. We did a ton of what we set out to do in the benchmarking suite and testing and some smaller issues here that were great for people to get involved with. The things that are remaining, the NATS object store implementation for WASI Blob Store is actually feature complete and tested in a PR. This is just something that we have on our maintainer backlog to review and get in. So I'm not concerned about this here at all. Masood, feel free to complain at this point if you'd like for us being bad PR reviewers. Using human time instead of milliseconds is something that actually has a PR open. I think we're just waiting on someone to respond there who's contributing it from the community. So awesome stuff there. And then HTTP server provider docs. Actually, Eric, sorry to put you on the spot. Is this something that is already completed? I know we looked at this one maybe before too.
I wouldn't call it quite completed yet, so yeah, we might want to push that one forward, but pretty close.
Okay. Yeah. I think there's few enough features on the previous roadmap, which really just focused on robustness of the project as we went to the incubating stage. We can just leave these here and we'll kind of wrap these up as we go to the start of the year. But good reminder that these are still here. So I did start on our roadmap project, which I can go ahead and get this linked out to folks. I followed the roadmap the road mapping process that's documented in our wasmCloud repo. It's kind of a test for making sure that we can do this in a repeatable way, and anybody could lead one of these road mapping sessions. I did come through and create this board. And the primary feedback mechanism that I use to create the tickets that are on there are either things that have been on our issue backlog for a little while, things that are requests from people who are running wasmCloud in various stages of development, QA to production that, essentially have asked for specific features, and all of the feedback that came from this GitHub discussion. So I really want to thank everyone here contributes in different ways, and I really want to thank Masood, Florian, um, Mark, and Aditya for leaving comments here. I know there's a lot of effort to kind of think around what you want to see come out of the project and leave these comments. So thank you so much for leaving the feedback here. I think what would be the best way to run through the roadmap is just basically talk through the individual issues that have come out of this discussion thread, and then talk about what has actually landed on the project board. And from there, it's really an open discussion. So I think that this may just be me talking at you about all these issues that the maintainers and community think are important. But please, at any point, feel free to raise your hand, add some context, and I will leave a little bit of time at the end to for any additional feature requests, things you think that should be on the roadmap that aren't already captured. Um, do folks have any questions, comments, concerns about just going through the roadmap? Alrighty. Yeah, just as a reminder, oh yeah, Masood, go ahead.
Uh, you know, I had an issue that we added to the roadmap in the previous quarter. It was about having an example which evolved into documenting it because I was happy to have just an example of a provider that has a custom provider that uses resources. That issue got closed because of inactivity, which is fine. My comment in general is that uh, for items that are on the roadmap, shouldn't they get closed intentionally rather than, it went stale and it was closed?
Yes, they certainly should be. I think this is maybe an oversight here. The For any of these issues that are on the roadmap, and I think we can maybe update our stale bot rules here, but we do have, and Lachlan, I see you have your hand up. We do have a what? We have a roadmap label that will prevent it from being closed for being stale.
Yes, there's two. I did make some changes to this recently.
Okay.
The Stalebot the Stalebot app is actually deprecated. So I migrated it over to the Stalebot action. And one of the things that it does do is it can look at labels, but it also looks at milestones. So if it's attached to a milestone, then it won't shut it. It won't mark it as stale. It doesn't say that it's like if it's automatically on the project, like it just putting it on the project board doesn't prevent it, but if it's attached to a milestone, then it will. So we'll just have to do that at the end of this. Yeah, we are going to be in the process of removing Stalebot from the org, but wanted to make sure that everything gets moved across from anything that's got the Stalebot configuration in there. We want to make sure that those repos all get moved across. So I'll add those as issues, and we can tackle those too.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think the stale default configuration, it's either 60 days or 90 days or something, but it shouldn't be staling out if we talked about it on the roadmap and then we just didn't do it until the end of the quarter or something like that. Okay. Well, I think it would be great to go over to let's do the community feedback first and foremost. Lachlan, you have your hand raised, but I assume that's from before. Um, nice. Um, So, Masood, I think you were the first person to comment on here. Thank you so much for the compliments and comments here at the top. Um, there are a couple of things that you mentioned in this in this comment that I wanted to make sure that we had captured on the roadmap in some form or function. The first one, which I think you just commented on, the documentation for handling of custom WIT resources. We just got that one reopened. It looks like it was a part of this roadmap, as you said. So I think that one can just roll over like the other tickets as well, onto the quarter one, or just kind of roll over into something that we do at the beginning of the year. We need to take a look at that one again. It sounds like if it went stale, sounds like we kind of, well, it went stale. I did take your additional feedback here around fixing and improving the testing framework. I interpreted this as our like provider SDK testing framework. So tell me if I am wrong there, but I know that you worked with this pretty extensively with the NATS blob store implementation. Is that right?
Right. And there seems to be some issues within the framework. And again, considering the recent conversation that we had, which was about making sure everything would have integration tests and those. So I think a foundation part of that would be to make sure that the framework itself is functional, and then asking for, let's say, providers or those sort of use cases to also have an integration test as part of the delivery.
Yes, yeah, completely agree. I do have this as kind of a draft issue on the roadmap right now, just because I wanted to talk about it here. But I know that we talked about like an issue with locking in tests that run in parallel. And then I really like the kind of idea to have this standard list of tests or this set of things that we make sure that we are testing, because even if it is, or sorry, we start with a baseline interface like blob store or key value. We should be able to do the same tests, but for different vendors, whether it's like an Azure blob store or NATS blob store, essentially run through that in each provider. And our provider SDK testing framework should make that really easy. I don't have any more pointed feedback for this one. I'll just mention that like on my side, personally, it's been a little while since I've written a provider integration test, so I think it's worth a revisit from the wasmCloud maintainers, just so like let's drop back into the provider projects and write some more integration tests.
So sorry to interrupt, Bruce.
No, fun.
Bruce, if whenever you get time, I know that you have been very busy, holidays, everything, to go back to that NATS blob store provider. I have a complete set of integration tests, which is non-functional. So that will be a use case to kind of identify some of the issues that we have in terms of integration tests that we do for providers.
Okay, great. I mean, that sounds like a great way to feed two birds with one stone. Do a provider or a PR review and check out those integration tests. That sounds great. I think this is something that we've needed for quite a while. I think we put a lot of focus on the component development experience and testing piece on the wasmCloud side, because that is what the majority of people do. And writing the providers is equally important. So getting back and giving them a little love and care would be great. So this one did make it just directly onto the roadmap. I think that it's going to be well worth our time to make sure that writing these providers in Rust and in Go is as easy as possible. So doing that across languages is something that we'll also have to consider. The suggestions that you had here, Masood, for improving, fixing the handling of the two edge cases for copy and move object for the different blob stores, I think this would be really. I didn't bring this onto the quarter one roadmap just because I thought they were really specific and they can pretty much get done at any time. And you suggested that we can basically just kind of have tickets for these. I think these would be great to do alongside the provider testing framework work. Like we can do it after that, and then we can know that it was tested. Same thing with the watcher interface for a NATS key value store. Masood or anyone, do you have any objections to me not bringing that onto the roadmap? I didn't exclude it. Sorry, to be clear, I didn't exclude it because I don't. It's not that I don't think that that we won't do it during quarter one. I just thought that it was specific enough. It would be easy to have a ticket and then do it once we get the provider testing framework in a better place.
You mean the watcher?
Yes. Yeah.
Sure. Again, the only reason for the other ones, I agree, and I have already mentioned that it doesn't need to be. But for that one, again, not that I insist to be there. I thought because it's a feature enhancements, we kind of classify it that way. But through regular issues, sure, that will be done.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds great. Alrighty. Then moving on from there, the only other one here that I saw was the implementation of wasi-nn, Masood. And I think my ask here for this one is I think I understand what I know what the wasi-nn proposal is and what the interface is like. Can I ask you to put together an RFC kind of similar to your attestations one that kind of goes through some of your thoughts around what you want wasi-nn to look like? I don't want to um, excuse me, I don't want to make too many assumptions here about what you want to do for this one. Awesome.
So it was a provider for wasi-nn, but I'm okay to write up a RFC for it.
Okay. Or even an issue is it doesn't have to be a super formal thing, but that one I felt like I shouldn't write. And I could have reached out to you ahead of time for that one too.
I just want, again, not taking too much time, just want to bring a new provider as part of the WASI interfaces to wasmCloud, at least one provider per quarter. So I picked that because I might need to use it, but I'm also okay to swap it. For example, if something is more important, like let's say WASI messaging, that might have more broader appeal than something like this. So I'm totally open to what is more useful to the community.
Okay. Yeah, let's start a discussion. I mean, it can be a GitHub discussion or even in Slack, but let's talk about that one because we've been moving a lot on the WASM Cloud messaging side lately. So I think it's a good thing for us to tease out, but kind of solidifies that maybe we don't need to bring it onto the roadmap yet. All right. Moving forward, Florian, you left some really awesome suggestions here. One for an already started implementation around the wash app and wash control subcommands to be able to do tab autocomplete. Um, Please, I will buy you a coffee or anything to get this one done. Just need to find the time. This would make it so much nicer to work with the CLI, like not having, you type out go and then hit tab and then you get go hello world. That'd be great. So this one was already started, and the original contributor of the PR did just say, hey, could really use some help getting across the line. So I think that's where that one is. So let's keep that one at the top of mind. And these next two items here, you may be delighted to know that we actually do support this now. So you can do a wash app undeploy like with the application YAML, and it'll go and look for the name in that YAML and then undeploy that application. But what you're asking for, kind of alluding to here, is exactly where we want to be, which is reusing the muscle memory of developers like who have already used Kube Control or Nomad or other tools. Like, let's just make it work the same, like the way that you would expect, and keeping going in that direction, which is great. I did also bring on the RFC per prominence and attestation onto the quarter one roadmap. Actually, it's all the way up here at the top. Masood, I know we just talked about this one and your response down here of the different phases, but after scanning this morning, I think phase one, two, and phase one, two, and three are probably in scope for this initial or for this first quarter. I think we can start creating sub issues around this, like to tackle them individually. And I think that this is one that you won't need to do alone. Actually working on actually getting into phase two would be really, really useful for people who are trying to generate their own SBOMs for wasmCloud applications. And then the external integration, I know that some of the folks in the community are also really passionate about this. So this is certainly,
So
I think
if
this
I
is,
get if at least phase one is endorsed, then I'm open to have an issue and implement that again because I have it in my pipelines too. So it's not.
yeah, I think, let's start with phase one, but phase one is certainly in scope. I think it would be great. For folks who are interested in learning more about this one, if we're just saying words to you, feel free to take a look at that RFC for signing in provenance and attestation, security words. Awesome. So yeah, that one brought onto the roadmap right here at the top, which is great. I think it'll just stay in triage until we get the individual issue. Like for phase one, we'll bring it on. And then one more. I think this is it was Florian, you had a specific ask around these link traits, which was great, and that one is now reflected on the roadmap under this issue in the wasmcloud.com repository. So just noting for anyone who wanted to take this up where you can look. And just generally that as WasmCloud has matured as a project, we have APIs, we have CLI contracts, we have interfaces, and that we should really be holding ourselves to a high bar in terms of, well, communicating breaking changes. I won't just say like not making them because we got to do them sometimes. And some of those have made it onto the roadmap as more specific issues, like these two right here for auto-generating Wasm Cloud and Wash CLI documentation on release. So we already have a process for generating docs for the CLI, but doing it so that we release a new version of Wasm Cloud and then a workflow auto-generates the documentation and updates it will really be very, very helpful for us not having out of date documentation or things that don't reflect the current state of the world. I didn't create an issue for discussing a formal process for like communicating breaking changes. But I think that this would be a great community meeting topic to talk about how when we're introducing new features and fixes and PRs, if it's a breaking change, how can we communicate that? And how can we better use like the conventional commit style that we enforce in the Wasm Cloud repo to like mark what has changed. So if anyone isn't aware, actually all of our commits in the Wasm Cloud repository, I use mine for an example, not because they're great, it's just because they're here, where you have a scope, or sorry, you have a like a category and then the scope, and then here you can actually indicate in the commit message if there was a breaking change. So I think surfacing that, we can do that really well programmatically. So that is the last little bit that made it onto the roadmap here. Florian, I just wanted to check, did I capture what your suggestions and comments here pretty well?
Yeah, completely. So many thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Moving right along, Mark, I didn't mean to. You sounded a little sheepish in this one. I didn't mean to call you out here. I really loved the suggestion to get back to the multi-tenancy support. That one really, I think this was another RFC that, yeah, that got staled out. I think it was a really interesting proposal, and ultimately we didn't have enough evidence around the way that we wanted the feature to work. So it felt like a lot to bring on when we didn't know. So I've left that one out of this roadmap. Feel free to object. I think we'd love to come back to it as soon as we know how we want a multi-tenant host to look or what have you. But your other one, built-in scheduler provider, I think is a great suggestion. So the cron job provider, this we had an example for this, maybe quite a long time ago. But this is something, where'd it go? Yeah, this is something that people have been asking for a little while. It's a pretty common use case to want to call a component on a set interval. And well, hey, thank you, Patrick, for filing this issue, wherever you are. But this, I think this would be great, great issue to take on, great like example provider to have, and it's a great first issue too. Like if you're looking to build capability provider, this one could be done in Rust or in Go fairly well. Yeah. Mark, do you feel like is there anything else you wanted to add onto that?
No, not really. I will not elaborate, just like the short text that I have. I will keep it short. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. And then, hey, yeah, Aditya, I love that you're interested in taking this one right off the bat, right? It's that would be great. I'm happy to assign this one to you, or depending on your own bandwidth, if you wanted to get started on it or something, just let me know. And I think we owe you a PR review, a long PR review as well, but we can talk about that later. Really big fan of the initiative here, just to jump in. And then the other one, which I struggled a little bit to define in a ticket, because some of these are it's creative work, I guess. But I love the idea of seeing videos for wasmCloud. Like, I'm not sure if you were asking us to create videos or if you were suggesting you were going to. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, I meant I would be making those videos.
That would be awesome. I would love to see that. So, uh, happy to reflect that, I guess, in an issue, but don't let that stop you. So, any of your thoughts on, exploration, or even if we, did like a code development live stream video or something, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I just got done with making a list of all the potential videos I could make. So if you're down for it, I'd be happy to share those ideas and get them
Yeah.
reviewed.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, yeah, looking forward to that, Aditya. We'll talk, I guess we'll talk offline, but feel free to share that, and wherever you would like. But yeah, so from there, that is going through kind of the discussion feedback that's on GitHub. I'd like to be a little bit more proactive about Q2 of 2025 after we get done with this road mapping session and we kind of close that other discussion. I'll open up the discussion for Q2 so we can start collecting ideas. But other than that, there's a good bit of other features and improvements and documentation that made it onto the roadmap. And I kind of want to talk about the background behind those issues and kind of the criteria that I use to put these together along with some of the other wasmCloud maintainers. Do folks have any other comments, question, concern from the discussion? Sweet. Just gave it a refresh to make sure that it comes back. Okay, so we did talk about, dude, my patience level is like just before you're finding the hand in Zoom. Go ahead.
Going back to the provider case, again, I'm not talking about wasi-nn, but 2 quarters ago, we agreed that it's a good idea to have providers on the roadmap, provider development. And again, I'm just kind of reminding, and I say that I think new providers merit being on the roadmap rather than not.
Yeah, I agree. Do you mean you said you're not talking about wasi-nn, but you're talking about the new provider that you'd like to develop NN or messaging or something from WASI?
I create a discussion, and once it's concluded, I'm just saying that probably we should, I mean, at a later date, add that to the roadmap.
Okay.
I take it down anyways.
Um, I'm good with that. I don't feel married to like what we get off this call with is the final roadmap and we can't add anything else. So I'm completely okay with that. Does anyone have any objections or thoughts to bringing that one on after?
No objections from me. I'm just posting a little update that we had in regards to wasi-nn since it came up here. And I don't have there's tons of different providers we could have. It would be really helpful to help prioritize which ones folks are most excited about. And so obviously doing it via discussions and GitHub issues is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Bailey. Okay, then yeah, Masood, we'll keep an eye out for that. Or let me know if you want to collaborate on that issue. But we can bring it on after the fact. Alrighty. So we did talk about the provenance and attestation RFC. I guess it's worth probably talking through the structure of the roadmap. You'll note that there are not any specific dates or timelines or like prerequisites on here. Standalone issues are generally a little nicer, but they fall under the three categories of documentation, new features, new functionality, and improvements over existing functionality. All of these we try to organize loosely into different stages of work. So just to say whether, hey, this is in triage as in we have a little bit more information that we need to get into this issue before somebody should just take it and run with it. Ready for work, which means, anything in here anybody should feel free to take, especially like if you take a look at the cron job provider, for example, anything that's marked as good first issue is awesome to take in the off of the roadmap. And then in progress is really just to indicate that someone has started on this and not to, I guess, duplicate work or go check first. So those are the different categories here. I'm just going to run top to bottom here. We talked provenance and attestation. This draft, actually ingress for minimal footprint deployment. I believe, Colin, this is your RFC that you're putting together now, right?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. I got distracted. Yes, thanks for pulling me back in. Yeah, is Roman's not here, right?
I think he's partially out of office today. I don't see him in here.
Well, it's late. Especially. Sure. So anyway, yeah, this is something I've been playing around with. I really the motivation is I guess what I wrote, but I think it's really important that we get wasmCloud working in lots of small places like a CDN compute kind of platforms, kind of the open source CDN compute platform is what I really think it has a chance to be. And that means we can't really just rely on Kubernetes to do network ingress and such. I know this is something I've talked about probably with at least everybody and like half the people on this call in different ways. But yeah, so I really want to see like what's the minimum we need to have in order to get a Kubernetes-like experience with just Envoy and wasmCloud. And take advantage of kind of the universal control plane distributed computing that we have with wasmCloud. So I played around with Envoy filters for the past few weeks. I actually kind of got something somewhat working, but it's not very flexible and it's very specific to Envoy. So it's not a great idea. So talking with Roman, if we just kind of went with a really simple append headers action from the reverse proxy, and had wasmCloud be able to handle that, that would probably be the easiest and most performant and flexible way to do things. And if we decide that actually it's not good enough, we can kind of iterate on it rather than kind of locking down into something like Envoy or Nginx. So yeah, so that's the idea. It requires a few things. So it requires Wasm, like kind of different way of wasmCloud just listening for HTTP than it does currently. I mean, I think ideally it would be we'd no longer kind of have a provider, an HTTP provider. Just wasmCloud would, have the ability to just listen on a port, and then it would have to, of course, register that, with a proxy, with a reverse proxy, be part of an upstream pool of some sort, depending on the terminology of the reverse proxy we're talking about. And it would then, of course, need to be able to recognize the header that we've kind of designate, or a series of headers, and then route to the incoming handler of the correct component. I mean, nothing, not rocket science. Pretty basic stuff. I think where we kind of like the follow-on stuff, could we export things that don't take HTTP handler? Maybe. There's definitely some WADM. There's some user experience parts of this that need to just kind of work, right? Something like some sort of identification of maybe kind of like almost like a plug, maybe some kind of a plugin or some sort of awareness of each group of hosts is going to have some sort of awareness of what proxy they're using. And maybe we think the ideal case is the Envoy proxy just runs on the wasmCloud host. So that's just another thing that we would run, or Nginx, or is there kind of a proxy tier? It should work with either, but I think we need to kind of probably identify like a MVP type setup. But yeah, so there's definitely some UX work. There's definitely some wasmCloud host work. There's definitely some kind of schema that needs to kind of be developed. But the ultimate goal, right, is that we don't want, at least I don't think we should be in the business of duplicating everything an HTTP proxy, a reverse proxy can do, because I just know that in the enterprise world, especially, you're going to get, very specific requests and very specific types of handling that all these reverse proxy and HTTP servers have been working on for the last God knows how long. So yeah, don't want us to be in that business. And I know it relates a lot to other things that we've been talking about, but yeah, that's the proposal.
Yeah. Thank you, Colin. I love it. I really appreciate the way that you kind of laid out the MVP. I think it makes a lot of sense. We already have our wasmCloud built-in HTTP server, so we're getting closer and closer to this world where you can just have the host listen on a port and then start to do that kind of routing. I think there's maybe, we'll figure out exactly how we want it to look on the WADM side, but we already have a notion of path-based routing, and this looks a little bit more just like header-based routing at the super basic level.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we're doing this in a way that's not like tightly tying wasmCloud to a specific reverse proxy or anything, then I'm all game for it.
Yeah, and Roman and I think Roman's actually really close to getting it just working.
Nice. Then even better.
Yeah. So right. Yeah. I mean, I think like maybe if I just a couple more seconds is, we're typical when we're in the Kubernetes world, we're used to working on a subdomain and mapping that to in a Istio type world, like a virtual service, right? Which is all part of the gateway API, which I've been out of the Kubernetes game for a few years now, but yeah, so it's really like it's a subdomain gets mapped to a header, gets mapped to a component is effectively what's happening. So, but I think these are very configurable. These host routes or I mean, depends on what proxy you're talking about, but these are meant to be dynamically configurable in the proxy. This is how Kubernetes, if it didn't, then Kubernetes kind of wouldn't work. Like the Cilium and Istio and all that stuff and the gateway API would not work. So it's kind of playing into the sweet spot of this stuff.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hey, native, Victor.
I think this sounds great. I'm really excited to see how this looks, but I really think that this doesn't require you know, I don't have any concerns. I'm a fan of this. And I think this will also speak really well to the folks who've been looking at wasmCloud for the more like distributed edge scenario, but this is a great feature set for that.
Makes sense.
I think this looks great. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, concerns on this one? Awesome. Moving on.
Yeah, sorry for stepping in. Maybe one question. So I didn't check it out. It's still on my to-do list, but there was also this RC for shared components. And my first idea was to use maybe a shared HTTP provider as some sort of ingress controller. So question is, what would be more preferable, the shared component or this built-in host process doing it?
All right. So this is more of a it's similar. It's the same idea. It's trying to solve the same problem. But I think I kind of back to my point is I don't want to be that might work for some basic cases, but then if you're not using Kubernetes, right, which kind of gives you usually has some Envoy in it anyway, we're going to be in this kind of loop of chasing features, and I kind of want to avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Also, because you mentioned Kubernetes. Also on my to-do list is actually checking out wasmCloud running in Kubernetes. So whatever solution we come up with should definitely work in Kubernetes as well, right? So if you implement it in the host and the host is running in the Kubernetes or in Kubernetes as a pod, then most likely I have some sort of ingress controller or a gateway in front of that. So I would have a gateway in front of a gateway. So
yeah. I mean, it's yes. But it would work the same way. So any kind of rules you wrote for Istio or Nginx and you're including Kubernetes, I mean, they'd also be transferable to this. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Bailey had a question and I'll stop talking.
Awesome. If we don't mind, if we could continue that discussion, maybe just in the chat, because I know we have a lot of other issues to get through. Is that okay, Bailey? Or is that we should talk about it for the roadmap question?
I didn't raise my hand for that reason. I like chatting.
Okay.
I like being quiet.
The question, for what it's worth sharing in the channel, is just like which Kubernetes are you going to use? Oh yeah. Okay. So that sounds great. You can see my roadmap screen, right? I'm trying to go off screen or go off share so that we can see everybody's lovely faces while we're talking about these things. One that I would like to propose, again, I proposed this on the last roadmap and was shot down sadly, which is okay. That's what this is for. But I would like to do this spike and propose it to folks because I really do think it's a great idea. Is actually Roman opened this quite a while ago. Thank you, Roman. Is in the Wash CLI. I think we should bundle wasmCloud and wadm as a library in the Wash CLI, as long as it doesn't make the binary size like prohibitively large. So that is part of the spike. But the main reasoning why I want to try this is I think it would lead to a lot more consistent local developer experiences, like local developer platforms, because we're not downloading two separate binaries from GitHub to actually run wadm and wasmCloud. We're just embedding those Rust libraries in the Wash CLI and running them just in the same process. So I think this would give us a lot more control over like the process lifecycle. As per our previous discussions, Wash is very much a developer tool with like a local workstation tool, not for standing up production deployments. And I think that we can retain the ability to download separate binaries for different versions. But I do think that the primary mode, like when you just run wash up or wash dev, is that we just have this nice single binary that runs everything. Question in the chat from Lachlan is, should it embed NATS too? That one's a little harder, but I think we should. I think it can include the NATS binary and then basically like exec that at runtime. We have precedent for doing this. that would make Wash, albeit a little bit of a larger tool, a like kind of all-in-one single binary over a bunch of separate ones. Do folks have reservations about this one? We did talk in the community call after the road mapping session, I think, about all the pros and cons of this approach.
I think there's a question around what it would look like to have two builds. What if there is one that includes Wash, and through maybe Rust features or something, you can turn off the embedded stuff?
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think the concern around the size and like operationally of the CLI, if it should include all of that stuff, makes a ton of sense. So my proposal here for this feature is that we during this quarter we do the spike to figure out how big does this make the binary size, you know, does it bloat it? Does it work better? Does it actually improve the developer experience? And if so, then we can get the work done for it.
I think we talked about this before, right?
Yep. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I proposed it for the last roadmap. And then
By now, Brooke, the only thing I would appreciate is that if you have a scapegoat in hand that is a toggle, remove everything and we go back to where it was. Other than that, just let's do it and test it and see what impact
okay.
and what
Yeah,
people say. But yeah, a simple toggle feature, whatever environment variable, I really don't care how to disable it just in case.
Yeah. I like that idea. Okay. That sounds great. Okay. Let's keep on moving here. Next on the feature work, I suppose we should move this one into in progress. This one is actually an epic. Thank you, Bailey, for adding additional information here. But the WASI proposals and WASI standards are a huge part of wasmCloud. It's a huge part of like the feature set that we need to support. And I think especially with our addition of feature flags lately, we should be aiming to integrate with WASI v3 as soon as we reasonably can, probably behind an experimental feature to start to make sure that we don't hurt anybody on the developer experience side just for getting out and testing it. But let's keep an eye, or let's track the Bytecode Alliance project, and as we need to, let's make sub issues on this epic for some of the tasks that we need to do on the wasmCloud side. Bailey, Victor, I know that you folks are working on some of the WASI P3 efforts. Is there any more context that we should add here, or do you think this like shouldn't be a part of our roadmap?
Well, I added it, so I'll tell you why I think it's important. I haven't made the sub issues yet, but I want us to build out some workflows so that we can do some integration without rolling it out, right? Because it's not going to be stable for maybe at least another 2 months. And so us integrating the changes that happen upstream, like in Wasm time and Wasm tools, and making sure that we're not seeing any breakage, anything like that is going to be really important. So having some issues to track that, having some documentation for the brave explorers that want to join the bleeding edge, having that available for people will be really important. And yeah, just having an epic style tracking issue will help us keep it all together because there's going to be a lot of little things that change in a world where everything is essentially async and supports streams and features natively. I think we'll see lots of minor updates that aren't necessarily breaking changes, but they'll all kind of roll up and be derived from this. So yeah, that's the goal. And if you're interested in working in the upstream, yeah, please reach out to Victor and I. We just did an async stand-up in the Bytecode Alliance Zulip, and if you're looking for issues, I did point out too that would be good for anybody that wants to get started. Thank you.
Awesome. Then yeah, think it belongs on here. All right. moving forward, the next one that I wanted to mention, and this kind of goes back to it kind of goes back to some of Masood's feedback in the discussion. But we've demonstrated this library called WAJ, the WebAssembly bridge testing framework for Go components. And one piece of documentation and examples that I don't think we currently have, or at least I don't know about it, which means we probably could do some work there, is how to write components to mock WebAssembly interfaces. So in this testing framework, you can actually run your Go component code as native Go code. So you can use debuggers and tests and everything like you're normally used to for Go. But for the interfaces that you import in your components, like HTTP, key value, messaging, any custom interfaces, those you will actually need to either compose away or mock. And so I think that a huge piece of documentation and enhancement for this would be how to kind of write your own components for this use case. I think that would be good. Let's just keep building on these testing frameworks, and I think that'll just this should really help for any use cases where we are essentially testing like custom interfaces. So your component depends on another component. You need to get that tested. We're running a little low on time, so I'm not gonna like pause for every issue, but folks, please feel free to just raise your hand if you had more than you wanted to discuss here. I think we spent a lot of time on the good ones, so that's okay. This one is a little more small. Okay. The next one that I think I captured here on the roadmap, I quite honestly probably owe you all a little bit more detail here around what this feature can do, but just to give you a brief, people who are running wasmCloud in real environments today, so like QA, dev, moving to production, generally there is a point where you come across wanting to constrain capability providers with resource limits. So with components, there are all kinds of controls within Wasm time where we can say no component can take up this much, more than this much memory. You can only run 2 at a time. You can't actually have the component be more than 50 megabytes, things like that. But we don't have the same restriction around capability providers. They are native binaries that they execute like on the machine. So I think what we really need to address this quarter, basically as soon as we can, is support for kind of externalizing those providers from the Wasm Cloud host. And what I mean is essentially them operating in the same mode that they are today. But for the people who are running capability providers like on their own machine or maybe in Kubernetes, it would be really powerful to be able to run a capability provider in a separate Kubernetes container, in a separate Docker container, and then constrain the resource, the CPU memory from there. So what I'm proposing here, and this is worth an RFC since it's just going to be an additional like mode to run providers in, is how we can actually support that in the Wasm Cloud host. I'm fine with pulling this one off until we can add a little bit more detail onto this one. I've certainly left it in triage, but I know that this has been top of mind for the folks who've been running Wasm Cloud, and really on my end, just apologies for not having a little bit more detail there. So for this one, I'll leave it as a note to maybe add a little bit more. Yes, and like Yona said, you could use systemd for these kind of things, or you should be able to use these kind of things. Yeah, Colin.
I just didn't know. Is this the only story we have like this with external providers? I know we mentioned it a lot.
We talk about providers a lot. Another really big story for providers is with the advancement of WASI P3 and like a native async model, we have a little bit more leverage to try capability providers as WebAssembly components, long running stateful WebAssembly components. And that is something where, again, you can constrain the resources with Wasm time, like with the sandbox. So Sort of. I mean, this isn't our only idea, but this is certainly something. The way that we get around this now is if you're running in these environments, you just run a wasmCloud host and then run that provider in that container, and then you can constrain the resources. So we have workarounds for it now, but a more native solution is the idea. Um, okay. Well, maybe we can bring this one up in a future community meeting too. In the same vein as bundling wasmCloud in Wash, simplifying the default wasmCloud platform deployment, which this is our Helm chart that we have in the wasmCloud repo. One area that seems to cause a bit of friction is how we kind of subsume we subsume a bunch of Helm charts as a part of our platform Helm chart. And there's not really anything wrong with that. But I do think it would be really beneficial, and I guess Bailey, you opened this one, you chatted with me about this a little bit. It would be really beneficial to essentially hide the NATS requirement where possible from people who are deploying in Kubernetes environments. So the Helm chart, when you're deploying the wasmCloud Helm chart, I think it would be really nice for people to be able to focus on deploying wasmCloud and not deploying this other service that we depend on with NATS. And I think that there is, a whole kind of discussion there, but when we're running wasmCloud, or sorry, when we're running NATS for wasmCloud, we know some of the parameters that it should run in. We can recommend those best practices, especially with the Helm chart. And so I think we can essentially embed this NATS piece into what we deploy, with the caveat that you can always turn that off if you have your own existing NATS deployment and you're running in Kubernetes. Because I know, I'm looking around on the call, Yakin, I know that you have your own NATS deployment already, and you kind of hook wasmCloud into that, right? We don't want to overprescribe here. Sorry to call you out. Miss,
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Or feel free to go ahead if you had any thoughts there too.
I know we had just the fact that people then have very complex NAT setups. They have different Jetstream domains and so on. Might cause trouble because the wasmCloud operator in particular makes some assumptions about those, right? How it's set up. So if it's deployed in parallel, that's kind of working out of the box. That's fine. But as soon as it comes to it, also needs to recognize that there are more complex NAT setups.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this would be purely, it would be maybe the default, but purely a side option because, wasmCloud needs a couple of KV buckets and streams and to have a Jetstream domain and for its leaf domain to be different. So making sure that all that can be configurable and kind of slot in to a more complex NATS deployment. When we're proposing this, I may reach out to you just to make sure that like in that kind of testing that it works for like your NATS deployment. I know that we have some folks like Dwayne comes in every so often. He has a complex NATS deployment. Let's make sure it works for that, and Synadia and things like that.
Touch base with me.
Yeah, Liam or Masood. I think it's Masood. You're up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of do a bit of reminder or maybe check. Due respect to Bailey, originally when this was proposed, which I proposed it, was to, we already have multiple Helm charts. The idea was that having a Helm chart that allows the operator to create a bespoke configuration and then deploy the entire platform. And that's why I called it wasmCloud platform chart. The entire platform with all of its dependencies and the configuration that they need. The moment that we say we want to simplify it, we're kind of going back to those other ones that we have, such as operator or even the wasmCloud host. that we also have, right? I'm just kind of reminding that that was the original intent of having everything included.
I think this is taking exactly what you did and just continuing to extend that effort. So it really helped to have a single way to install the wasmCloud platform. Where people are having trouble with it right now, at least what I've observed, is that the NATS chart specifically has so many different knobs to configure. And when people are running that kind of stuff in production and they're already familiar with NATS, they just have a totally different setup, right? They don't use that chart.
So what I have observed, Bailey, is that people mostly get tripped by the fact that, and again, history is history. We can't do anything about it. But the fact that we have a chart that is called wasmCloud host, and then the host is called wasmCloud host. So when they kind of read documentation and those, and maybe that's where some of these improvements could be applied, is that they mix up these things, because I have seen multiple users coming back and saying that, do I need to deploy wasmCloud host or don't I need to deploy wasmCloud host? And mostly they get confused there. But you're speaking to customers and those, and you might have a lot more interactions, of course.
Yeah, I think there are different personas here of the folks, kicking things for the first time in an open source kind of environment versus in a more enterprisey world. There's definitely a couple different experiences, but I think you're spot on. I think that's another source of confusion. I will say that having it where you can choose to deploy the host versus choosing to deploy the operator is a really important feature that we provide, because there's a lot of places that when they're getting started cannot use custom resources or CRDs or install an operator. When they just want to load hello world, all they really want is just a host. And so I think there's a couple facets here. If we change what we embed, then we can simplify what we have to install. And that's sort of the motivation for that one, is continuing down that path of having that all-in-one kind of experience.
Yeah, Masood, your comment in the chat around the choice of names for the chart, I think is very valid feedback. I think these two kind of go hand in hand, that we're seeing people have friction with deploying Helm, whether it's with we're seeing people have friction with, the process that we use to deploy wasmCloud on Kubernetes. So, addressing some of those naming concerns, the organization of the chart are all really valid things to take on. Yeah, Yortis.
Yeah, so two things. One, I noticed the Grafana Helms also have to deal with this. No, the Prometheus Helm also have to deal with, do I deploy Grafana with it or not? So I noticed that it's common for these like bundlers to say, hey, I can deploy this for you and it's gonna work, right? Like Grafana, Prometheus will come with Grafana already, or vice versa, whichever one you want to deploy. And there's when you could have the opportunity to have any defaults you think it would be prudent to have, instead of being bound to the NATS directly, Helm chart. Two, every environment is different. So although I understand the problem of the issues, and it's not that it's not true, but have we collected the use cases and what people are complaining about? And the experience. And Bailey, this is why a long time ago I suggested that to always have tools that automatically sunk every question that people ask and complaints into a blob of here is the context. Because I'm failing to understand what for NATS is actually a problem. Is it networking? Is it, for example, auth always for me using NATS? I don't know what I'm doing most of the time because it's so complex, especially in enterprise where you have to deal with different authorization and permission stuff like that is just over my head. And that's what I'm trying to figure out from our conversation. because otherwise we will go into, what will be the optimization? What will be the changes if we don't know what the pain points are today precisely? And maybe some of those pain points is actually documentation, and people needs to understand NATS because it's just core to the system.
I would argue for wasmCloud that it's a key part of the platform, but it is the platform, right? Where there isn't necessarily a huge reason for the person that is building on top of wasmCloud to need to know all of those details if we do the right things and have the right documentation. At least that's sort of where I would like to go. It's not like it's like in Kubernetes when you do an install and you're using something like kops. By default, you want to get something that's pretty good, right? And you don't typically read a ton of documentation for the first roll. But then when you're rolling out in production, that's when you get into doing that next level. And so I think right now what I'm asking if we could consider is bringing out that initial thing that you have to read and get expert at, making the default very simple. It just works for wasmCloud. It's not trying to solve your entire NATS data plane for everything at your company, just what wasmCloud needs. And then making it so that the more advanced users, the folks that are doing it, they continue down the path that they're basically on.
Yeah, this was literally related to the same. Remember the documentation, Bailey, about like some of the stuff from NATS, either you take ownership of it or you don't, right? Like that's up to you. But it seems that we more and more over time needs to take ownership of documenting for NAT's sake. And I think I know you know that already, but us like acknowledging that's the case, right? We cannot just simply say, "Hey, go to NATS," because at that point we lose control over the experience, and in the worst case, we lose opportunity to see what people actually having trouble with. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then I think it's probably worth maybe a little bit more evidence if we can gather it for that issue to say, hey, here's where people are running into trouble, and then get that fixed. All right. Well, we do have some more. So I think that we can definitely keep talking about that platform deployment. So the next three that are here in the improvements side, I filed each of these, but each of these issues came from talking with people who came with talking to other contributors on the wasmCloud side. I talked with Lucas, who has been in here in the community call quite a bit, doing like the demos for the benchmarking tests and some of the wasmCloud Go work he may have demoed last week. I'm sorry, I didn't watch the meeting. Oops. But a lot of what these three improvement tickets really center around is formalization and stabilization of our APIs. So there's a couple places that were a little inconsistent with our protocols and with our CloudEvents. And this is such a small thing, but really these add up over time. There are with our CloudEvents, there are places where we include the host ID as host_ID. There are places where we include it as ID, and there are places that we don't include it at all, and we leave it on the source field from the CloudEvent itself. Now, I do think that it should be on the source field, probably always. There's like a whole philosophy around CloudEvents of who is the source and all of that. So we won't get into that. But I do think that for this one, specifically calling attention to where we specify a host ID versus calling it an ID. This one, which is probably worth a little bit more discussion, is defining our CloudEvent structures in a language agnostic code gen format. So a language agnostic IDL. This could be WIT. I don't have any opposition there. It could just be a JSON schema. I don't actually really mind what it is, but I think that now that we have the set of tooling in Rust and Go, coming soon in TypeScript, and we have a need to keep our documentation as up to date as possible, it would be awesome to define our event structures in an IDL and then code gen those structures in specific languages and have our documentation update automatically from that. So I'll pause. Well, what's the next one? The next one is a small one too. We have control interface operations and events where we note provider ref, image ref, component ref, image reference, and I think we should just kind of standardize on this one because some of these event structures were originally written separately from the or sorry, some of these were originally created, the structure of them before you had to have an image reference, like you could just load it from bytes. But obviously that's not the case anymore. So I think for all of these, the notion of these is just formalizing our types and structures, just like we did for the control interface API as we were leading up to 1.0. And I think these kind of improvements are just going to make it easier for us to write additional tools, do testing, have understandable APIs and things like this. Jonas, it looks like you have some pretty good ideas here too. We don't need to talk about them here. You're welcome to, but we don't need to talk about them now. Do folks have other areas that they've noticed these kinds of protocol slight inconsistencies? I guess we don't need to talk about them here, but if you do, please feel free to file issues because what I would really like to do now, as we're solidly approaching a year of being on 1.0, is to just kind of re-examine some of these structures, be really consistent, and lean into where the project is now as a pretty, well, I don't know, mid-level maturity level. I feel like I can't say that we're like a mega mature project, but we've been doing it for a little while. So, yeah, please feel free to raise your hand if you have questions, comments, concerns on there. Jordan, I saw you come off mute for a half second. Was that just to do a joke?
No, I was about to say that, pat yourself in the back. You in CNCF now you move to a, different stage. So, yeah, that speaks to the outcome of it. And yeah, don't be shy about it. You earned it.
Big shoes to fill. All right. That sounds good. Okay. Moving right along. Some other feedback that we've gotten from folks. I think maybe Lars, did you file this issue? Yeah. Producing the secrets NATS KV image, like the Docker build is an image that's in the wasmCloud repository, I think is something that we've needed for a little while. For a little background, the secrets NATS KV backend, so like probably the easiest one just to run out of the box, would be a really beneficial binary to be able to run in a container. And we have a Docker container, and Lars has actually put in a couple contributions here to actually like make sure it has CA certificates and things like that. But we don't actually produce this container. We have the Docker file, but we don't actually build the container and publish it. I think we should just do this one. It probably is just kind of a quick chore for somebody to knock out in CI. But I won't. I'm not signing anybody up to this one. I think we should do that one. It's a artifact that we have, so we should publish it. Moving on from there, I have gotten a couple feature requests for this one, which is why I added this issue to support a built-in HTTP client capability provider. So the same way that we have the built-in HTTP server, which supports all the same configuration options as the binary provider, and you can kind of hot swap them in the same way that you would do the external one. Having a off by default but toggleable HTTP client would be really nice to, especially in this idea of all these components that are essentially just like HTTP proxies are doing, like being triggered by HTTP and making their own requests. Just to make this a little bit simpler, it will make our wash dev experience easier too, because we have yet another built-in to lean on. And this would just basically be in the same format that you can start this HTTP server, you can start this HTTP client. So this would be an in-process one in the host, similar to the server. Yeah, Masood, go ahead.
To just be efficient, knowing that basically the WASI next revision of HTTP is coming up and simplifies the interface, shouldn't we kind of defer this and implement it then rather than doing it now and then redoing the work?
It's a good question. After looking at the HTTP server, like the built-in, I mean, it is largely the same code that we use for the provider and the built-in. I don't feel strongly either way, I guess. I think that there will be certainly a lot of work that comes with supporting WASI P3 initially, maybe alongside P2. It's probably worth considering the new HTTP interface and like how different it would be. I don't think we have to block on it. Bailey, do you have any thoughts there? Looking to you. I know that the new HTTP interface is super nice. Should we like hold on this one for a little while? Do you have any thoughts on that? How close is WASI P3 for us to do it? Sorry. Yeah.
We have an aggressive target of Q1, but I would say that that's a very aggressive target. And we're currently on track, but I think we learned a lot last time once we were a little bit further than we are now for WASI P2. So there's several unknown unknowns essentially in the integration with the guest toolchains. So we'll know more once we get a little bit further with that. Hopefully that type of integration starts in about 2 weeks. So right now I don't have great fidelity on when WASI P3 until we start getting feedback from folks like the Gophers and .NET and the Python folks. That's really when we'll learn what we got to change. For this specific issue, it's definitely true that, instead of having incoming and outgoing handler, now you just have handler, bidirectional streams. But I would say that I wouldn't wait because the way that you implement it isn't too different. And that the code that we write to make that real is going to be the same code, basically, with a different interface once we put it on WASI P3. So it'll just get prettier over time and hopefully not duplicate work.
Thank you for asking the question, Masood, and thank you for Bailey for some context. I still kind of don't feel strongly either way. I saw your thumbs up, so I'm taking that as a all good. But
Well, I just commented because again, I said if we have limited time between all of us, then maybe we should spend it somewhere else. But Bailey's saying that most of the code base is going to be the same, so it's not going to be much of an effort to port it, which is great news.
yeah, awesome. Great. Well, trucking on along here. Thanks everybody for hanging out for a little while too. If you did this call in the chat a little bit earlier, but if you need to drop and you wanted to talk about something, just raise your hand. But we're getting close to the end. Don't worry about it. Okay, built-in HTTP client provider. Great. The other one, which we've had on the backlog for quite a little bit, this is just a big old refactor, and comes down to time and all of that, is consolidating wash CLI and wash lib. Originally, we split these up for reusability. Like you could bring in the functionality from wash lib without bringing in all of the CLI bits. But of course, there's no real reason for us to. And it was weird to import a CLI library in a different Rust project, but there's no real reason for these to be separate. We actually do have the wash crate now, and we probably should be using that with feature flags to do the separation. It would just be really nice especially on our side, on the maintainer side, for releasing this to not have to release a library crate and then a CLI crate to like put out a new feature in Wash seemed just like an extra step, you know? Let's cut that out. So I think this one certainly has the potential to be a rage coding project. Just somebody gets too tired of it and then combines them. But please, the ask here is that if someone takes this, then let's make sure to create a new crates wash directory where we combine these. We can do a little set of testing for a little while and update our pipelines while maintaining the old versions individually. This is definitely a big task. And I think we will want to talk about this one again in a community meeting before we take on this effort so that we can kind of feature freeze wash for a week or two. Yeah, we'll be good. Hopefully we can get to it this quarter. That'd be really nice. The other improvements here are a little bit smaller pieces of work. I think they probably require a little bit less discussion because they've been on our issue backlog for maybe a month or so. But these are all really good first issues. So for folks who are looking to contribute for the first time or just looking for smaller chunks to bite off, the Ready for Work improvement tab is going to be a great place to look on this roadmap. So replacing the RPC and CTL flags with --nats for wash up and wash dev. This will really help cut down the amount of CLI flags and environment variables we have to handle on the like local platform side, which will be super nice to not, left to parse. The help text gets shorter, and the code should get a little bit simpler. This is a great one to take on. Wash dev hanging on a control C. If you run wash down in a different terminal window, this one's just a good old bug report, right? But these are things that we should certainly get captured on the roadmap to make sure that we don't lose sight of them. Avoid building all of the providers to lessen CI load. This one's less fun for a new community member to take unless you are just a huge GitHub Actions and Nix lover, which some of you are, so let us know. But we actually do have a PR that went in recently. Thank you, Roman, to rework the crate features that we have in the wasmCloud project. So now you can build individually just one provider from the top level of the repo, or just wasmCloud, or specifically exclude them. So I think we should integrate this into our CI to make it go a little faster, to make sure that if you only make a change in the NATS object store, NATS blob store provider, then wasmCloud shouldn't rebuild. It should just be the NATS object store provider. I think I said this before with our last CI demo community meeting. I know this seems like baby's first CI, like, yeah, we should only rebuild this one thing. We have all this stuff in place to do it. We should just do it. So this would be a great one. Just want to make sure that it's captured here. Let me know if you want to take this, but it's probably going to be somebody on the maintainer side. Mark looks really excited about it, so I'll let him have it. Okay, this last one here, emitting an error count when the logging buffer is full. This is actually something that I have not reproduced, but it is certainly a concern for folks who are running wasmCloud in production. The tracing appender that we use for logging is the non-blocking one, which is run on a separate thread. It's got a buffer for logs, and the key point is that when components are executing or when providers are executing and they log something, we don't actually block execution of that provider or component for the log to be emitted fully. So it goes into a buffer and then gets flushed out to standard error, or it gets sent out to OTel logs and things like that. This is good. This is the behavior we want. However, it is possible for this buffer to fill up. And if the buffer fills up and, too many logs are going into the system, then it'll drop logs. And that's how it maintains its non-blocking behavior. So what I would really like to do, this is a great first issue because it's not huge in scope, is to use the error counter struct. This is actually included in the tracing appender to output an error log, maybe just on the first one when you drop one, and then emit an OTel metric counter with that error count. I think it would be really nice to which I guess we should make sure that that's not like a recursive explosion. But it would be really nice to know if this ever happens. And maybe we just put in this error log and we never see it, but it is certainly a concern. I mean, it's an implementation detail of this logger. So this is something that is coming up as a concern for folks who are running like thousands and thousands of components that may be all logging at the same time, things like that. So this will be a great one to keep on the roadmap. Whew. Okay, two more. Two more that I did not touch on the documentation. One on the documentation side is using conventional commits for release notes and change logs. I think this was also Lars on the wasmCloud Slack that was looking at the wasmCloud 1.5 release and said, hey, it's hard to parse these release notes. There's a lot of chores and dependency updates and things. And I think this is something we can, I mean, there's totally tooling for this. We do conventional commits in our whole repo. We should use them to generate release notes more so than just GitHub's default generation, which is pretty solid. But this one, I think, would just go a long way to making sure that our releases are better documented. And last but not least, folks, feel free to add comments. Last but not least, in the December 11th community meeting, we did demonstrate kind of a Kubernetes setup for doing benchmarking of wasmCloud applications using Grafana's K6 project. This is something that some of the folks at Cosmonic were working on, and like essentially to do benchmarking. And we demoed it in the community meeting, or it was demoed in the community meeting, essentially be like, hey, look at this cool thing. If you like it, we're open sourcing it, and it'll be a Helm chart and everybody can have it. So this is just keeping the folks or this is just the tracker to make sure that we get this open source as a Helm chart. I actually put it as in progress because here it is. Ta-da! Thank you, Taylor. There is the Helm chart for essentially standing this up and running your own benchmarks. Thank you, Yakin. So this was just making sure that we captured the work that we said, hey, this is going to be open source super, super soon. And here we go. So this one will probably get closed out here pretty soon, but just to make sure that we had that captured as work. We're doing a lot of hard work here on the wasmCloud roadmap. We can throw ourselves one softball here at the end. Okay. Thank you folks for letting me talk at you for and with you. Got a lot of feedback in this hour and a half. Oh man, even Otter told us that we reached the recording limit. I did promise that I wanted to pause for a little bit at the end. Apologies for going a little bit over, but we talked about a lot of features that we propose and improvements and things we'd like to do over the quarter. Is there anything else that folks feel like is really important that we haven't talked about that should be captured on the roadmap here before we kind of wrap up this session?
We want to have mercy on you, Brooks.
No, this was great. I always enjoy this community meeting every quarter. It's awesome. Okay. Well, then I will let you all go and stop yelling at you. But thank you all so much for coming and contributing contributing to the project as a whole, leaving your requests, things that you'd like to see. It is hugely helpful for us to determine the direction of the project. If you have any feedback about how we lead this session, please feel free to drop a note in the wasmCloud Slack, or you're welcome to reach out to me privately as well. I'm trying to follow the process that we're putting in our own documentation and governance, because this is a CNCF project. Anybody could do this thing, right? Well, what will come out of this? I'm going to get on a document that kind of summarizes some of the high level goals for this roadmap. I'll do a little retrospective on the last roadmap as well, and that'll get updated on the wasmCloud doc site, and everybody can take a look. Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone for coming to this extra long version of wasmCloud Wednesday. I'm gonna stop the recording, but have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brooks. That's a huge amount of work, dude.